Hi, welcome to my channel, Reader Woman. My name's Judy, and let's talk books. I am really excited. I got my lovely book, Jane and Dorothy, A True Tale of Sense and Sensibility. So, Jane Austen and Dorothy Wordsworth. Um, I heard about this book and I went ahead and went on Amazon, pre-ordered it, and it came. So I haven't read a word of it yet, but I thought what we would talk about is how I came to be interested in this book. Jane Austen has been a part of my life since probably when I was a tweener, probably 13, 14. And of course, I have a lot of books to show you. Pride and Prejudice was my first one, of course. It's everyone's first one. It is a delight. It is a joy. And it has sisters. And I always loved how fresh it was every time I read it. And so I haven't read it for a few years now, but of course I'll reread it. I have this really, oh my gosh, I bought this in 1956, 1976, come on now, I'm not that old. And anyways, it's a People's Classic Library. One of these little cheapo, let's pretend like we're something fancy. But it's hung out, it's hung around, and I'm very, very happy that I still have it. That is Sawyer. I think when I start talking, he thinks, pay attention to me. But we're going to talk about Elizabeth Bennet. It's so funny because one of the stories I have to tell is of my youngest niece, whom you will meet in a couple of videos. They're out of order, and my channel was going to be named something else, and so it'll be a little disorganized. But she wanted to read Pride and Prejudice, and her parents... Excuse me, just a second. Okay, I'm back. I don't know for how long. But I was interested because her mother, my custer, Sandra, made the decision that she would not read this until she was of a certain age. Now, when I was growing up, I had no limitations. I could read whatever I wanted to. And so it really kind of struck me as an odd thing that she was limiting Amelia's access to books. And I mean, particularly when you have a classic like this, I thought it was quite interesting. However, it is romantic, and she was wanting to limit how that works out. So so they read it, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, and they read it together, Amelia and her mom. And and to this day, it's kind of a little secret language that they have with each other. And, it's really fun and sweet. But I know we talked about it, Sandra and I did, afterwards, and she was quite surprised whom her daughter connected with sister-wise. Amelia felt like she was Kitty. Now, Sandra, of course, being the extrovert she is, always knew that she was Elizabeth. She was Lizzie Bennet. And who did I think I was? I always feared I was Mary. I did. I always feared that I was going to be Mary. So, come on. And, it's like, it's a great book. And while I love it dearly, my favorite Austen, I've got them all pulled out, it's Persuasion. I read it as a teenager. I reread it periodically. I love this book. I love this book on so many levels, and particularly for family life, and not so much the Elliots, because they are effed up. Pardon my language, but they are terrible people. But the Musgroves and the whole connection that the Musgroves have to, and I can't remember Anne's sister, that terrible sister, but the connection of the Musgrove sisters to their brother, to their mother and father, to their cousins, you know, that whole network of family connections that hold you together, that demand a certain behavior, a certain, whether you wanted to or not. You know, because I remember it, you know, Mary is indisposed, and the two sisters decide, the two Miss Musgroves decide that they're going to go for a walk to see one of the sisters, Beau, their cousin, and you know, lo and behold, they don't want to invite her, but they have to, because that's what family does. The other thing that's always struck me about Persuasion is how Anne is led. Anne is a very honorable woman. She gave up happiness for many, many years because of family and her, I don't say she trusted her friend, Lady, it's been a little while since I've read it, Lady so-and-so, I've forgotten her name, but this was a woman who was in lieu of her mother, and so she honored what her father and society and her closest female friend told her that she needed to give up. He wasn't the captain at the time, but her captain. And I understand that, how a sense of duty can lead us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do. I think it was an extreme example, but I think in some ways this is a little bit of a look at Jane Austen's own life, of having to put certain family members first above yourself, and, you know, as a single sister, that, you know, anytime your brothers were married, or your other sisters, you were definitely the lower rung. And the other thing about this particular novel is every single time I read it, I always feel like, are they actually going to get together? Because it never feels certain. It just never does. The scene in the library where they're, you know, glancing and a note is passed, and you're just like holding your breath that it's actually going to happen. And it does. But then, you know, even then, let me see if I can find it quickly. Even then, she ends it. Anne, they're talking about Anne. She might have been absolutely rich and perfectly healthy and yet be happy. Her spring of felicity was in the glow of her spirit. As her friend Anne's, oh, sorry, that was wrong. Okay. Anne was tenderness itself, and she had the full worth of it in Captain Wentworth's affection. His profession was all that could ever make her friends wish that tenderness less. The dread of a future war, all that could dim her sunshine. She gloried in being a sailor's wife, but she must pay the tax of quick alarm for belonging to that profession which is, if possible, more distinguished in its domestic virtues than in its national importance. So even the lovers, once they've gotten together, you just never know. It's an uncertain future being married to a naval man. So anyways, this is the one that's always stolen my heart. And I've read Emma several times, which I love for its hilarious characters. I've read Sense and Sensibility. It doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't hit me the same way as the other two. I prefer Emma to that one. And while I've read Northanger Abbey and also, that dreadful one. Sorry. It's not dreadful, but Mansfield Park. I have never really liked Mansfield Park, but I've read it. So it's only been in probably the last 10-15 years that I've actually kind of gotten interested in finding out more about her life. And so I've read 2 or 3 biographies, and it's such a quiet life. It's and then her sister Cassandra burned her papers. How awful is that? And I realized that for her, she was protecting her sister, she was protecting herself, she was protecting her family, but at the same token, she denied history. She denied history. So, anyways, I look forward to this actual biography of the 2 women. So let's look at Dorothy Wordsworth. What do I know about her? Not very much. Not very much. I haven't read a ton of Wordsworth. And the way I know Wordsworth the best? Rumpole of the Bailey. I love the TV show. I have loved reading the books. And, of course, Rumpole quotes consistently. So, I always knew that there was something good there, but, yeah, it wasn't necessarily for me. I've never been a poetry buff. Okay, I'm obviously lowered myself in people's estimation. And maybe it's something I shall take up in later years. But, yeah, and so where else do I know of Wordsworth? He's also been a favorite of Harold Bloom. I have been reading Harold Bloom for many, many years. I haven't read everything that he has written, but I started with, let's see here if I can find the title here. How to Read and Why in 2000, which I found fascinating. It's a fascinating question. As a reader, how to read and why do you read? You just read. But anyways, I've enjoyed encountering him in various books. This one is the best poems of the English language. And I have access to Wordsworth. I realize he is a very, very important English poet. And his early work is better than his latter work. But that's probably true of most of us. So I I look forward. I know that his sister lived with him, that she was dependent upon him, and he was married as well. And I think they shared quarters with the Coleridges as well for a while. So I have a brief, basic little history. Um, but it's that sister syndrome. And I myself am a sister to a brother. um, and and we actually share a house together. So I can only imagine for these two women who were sisters, who were unable to really live on their own, who had to get along enough with their family to have an income, to have a place to live, a roof over their head, food, um, you know, little joys and pleasures would have to come from family members. So these are definitely two women that I see that family and their connection to their family is not just love, tenderness, but also um, a necessity, a way of surviving. Um, Otherwise, just like the Brontes, they would have had to have gone out to become governesses. I mean, what else was there outside of becoming ladies of the night? I mean, I just don't, it was a terrible time to be an unmarried woman. And so, yeah, I really look forward to this book, and I will let you know more. But I thought it'd be interesting to just kind of give you a brief history of how I became so riveted by this book. And it's kind of what I do. I'm not that good at book reviews, but everything's connected for me. And I was at one time going to be a comparative literature major. So I like the similarities. I like the connections, pulling different genres and different books together, hopefully giving a little bit more depth and light to the whole genre. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll be talking soon. Good night.